Hi everyone and welcome to Backchat. Welcome to this channel. Welcome to me. My name is Christine Jaureguiberry. I'm a yoga and Pilates teacher for scoliosis, for those with scoliosis. And yes, thank you so much for joining me. Now, I know that a lot of you know me already, so you're wondering why is she telling us all of this, obviously. Obviously, of course, that things have changed a little bit on this channel as well over the last few weeks. So originally we were called Yogaberry, and I was just teaching yoga for scoliosis. Now over the years, I've kind of developed my own style, I guess. You kind of pick and choose things that you like, pick and choose things that you don't like, which you leave. And I have found myself bringing more and more kind of um, functional movements, Pilates, kind of a little bit from everywhere into my movement practice, into my yoga practice, which is why I started earlier this year. I started to train as a Pilates teacher as well, because I feel that Pilates has got so much to offer for those with scoliosis, and I just wanted to really understand it really well, really be able to teach it, obviously, as well, which is why I wanted to discuss today, of course, um, the differences, maybe the differences and what there is that both yoga and Pilates have got to offer for those for with scoliosis, but also maybe some things that maybe we need to be a little bit mindful of with scoliosis, and if especially if our scoliosis is causing us pain and discomfort, if there are problems, um, certainly spinal fusion, certainly if you're kind of being threatened by having to go through spinal fusion. So yes, that's what I'm here to discuss today. So if you are here live, come and get involved. So I would love to know if you practice both yoga and Pilates, and maybe if there's one, if you have a preference over one or the other. So I would love to hear that. And yeah, maybe there's one that you I think everyone kind of gravitates to one or the other. I don't know if that's the case. For me, originally, certainly it was yoga. It was just something that I immediately kind of connected with, and I always found Pilates to be a little bit boring, I have to say. And it's only kind of been in recent years, getting older as well, where I've kind of really started to appreciate what Pilates has got to offer as well. So come and say hello. Let me know if there's anything you've got to share as well, because obviously this is my point of view. This is my point of view as a yoga and soon fully qualified Pilates teacher, hopefully. Um, and we all have kind of certain perspectives, of course. So, and we especially, I think, with yoga, there's so many different styles of yoga, and actually it's the same with Pilates as well. You can one Pilates class might not be exactly the same as the next, and even though I found that Pilates seems to be a little bit more standardized than yoga, certainly, and there are so many different types of yoga practice, of course, that it can maybe be a little bit confusing, and it can be a little bit difficult to compare, which kind of brings me kind of to the first kind of yeah, this can be it can be an advantage and it can be a disadvantage of yoga. So yoga is this large thing. Of course, it's much more than just a movement practice. If you're kind of going into all the um, um, kind of philosophical background and everything, and meditation, and in the original yoga, as it was called, there was no mention of like people doing triangle pose or anything like this. They were just literally sitting and meditating or practicing practices to yeah um, to achieve enlightenment. That was kind of the main purpose of yoga. So how I am comparing it today, of course, here is from my Western perspective, as someone who has been to lots and lots of yoga classes, of course, in gyms, in yoga studios, in community centers, community halls, as a teacher of yoga from this, again, Western perspective, which is very much movement based. So we like our triangle pose, we like our sun salutations. Um, I love Ashtanga yoga and, flowing from one movement to the other. I love Iyengar yoga, where we're practicing and being really specific and holding poses for long periods of time. I love Yin yoga, which is a lot slower, where we kind of a little bit more passive. I love restorative yoga, where we're practicing with lots of props and belts and things like this. So I think we have to keep this in mind, that yoga, if we're just talking about yoga, there's a huge variety there. And I think this can be a little bit of a difficult thing for those with scoliosis, and thinking, well, where am I going to be safe, right? Which is the yoga class for me? So again, this is kind of already kind of bringing me into the cons of yoga, which I didn't want to go into that straight away. But yeah, I would love to hear from anyone who is here right now. And what is it that you prefer? Do you prefer yoga? Do you prefer Pilates? What do you think? What are your thoughts for, especially with scoliosis? So both of them, to bring it back to where we're kind of why I integrated or decided to integrate both of them together. Both of them have got so much to offer. Both of them are great for improving posture. Both of them are focusing on elongation of the spine, of being upright, of maintaining good posture, of movement practice to develop body awareness, of course. Body awareness, strength, flexibility. All of these things are great. But what is it maybe that is different from one to the other? Good. So for me, I've written a few notes down because I don't want me to get sidetracked, which sometimes happens, I have to admit, and then I will get distracted. And my goal is to keep these back chats briefer than they used to be, and just making sure you get lots and lots of value out of it, and you actually get something from listening to me here for um, however long this is going to take. Good. So coming back to yoga, definitely one of the main things that I think that Pilates is maybe lacking a little bit is the whole relaxation part of it. Let me know if you agree with this. So Shavasana, so the final relaxation pose, is important. And for most yoga teachers, again, from my perspective, this Western perspective, um, you will probably not be in a class where there is no Shavasana at the end, where we focus on relaxation. So this is what I've definitely found to be kind of a very big difference between yoga and Pilates practice. So yoga practice usually, and again, that depends on what class you start with, but very often we start lying down and we already start to kind of getting into the breath and getting the nervous system into this state where we can start to relax. If you go to a doctor and you are stressed out, um, most likely they will be recommending yoga over Pilates for you. So I think that is one of the it's one of the major differences. And I think for those with scoliosis, relaxation is such an important part. And I like to call it kind of dismantling of that pattern that we kind of accumulate. If we are in our scoliosis, and let's say you've got an S-shaped scoliosis, maybe one shoulder is a little bit higher than the other. Maybe you can see that, or you can feel that there's a little bit of a rotation. Um, and if we're going straight into our movement practice, we're kind of taking our scoliosis pattern with us. So I find it really beneficial to kind of emphasize relaxation, or work on relaxation. Sounds like a contradiction, but getting yourself into a relaxed state, lying on the floor, where we almost kind of dismantle a little bit all the additional imbalances that we have accumulated throughout the day. Okay, lovely. So Colleen is saying prefers yoga, as Pilates got me in trouble with unexpected pain, whereas yoga, I have never had any issues. So that's interesting, of course, Colleen. And I think, yes, if something ever happened to you in a class, then of course this is going to put you off, right? And this is then taking your nervous system into the state of, ooh, this is maybe not a good idea. Maybe this is not the right thing. Now, I would say to that, it's probably going to depend on the teacher, their knowledge, of course, of scoliosis as well, for both yoga and Pilates. And oh yes, and Colleen is actually saying this as well. So she's saying depends on your teacher's knowledge of scoliosis and your pain, of course. Yes, absolutely. But I think if you've had a bad experience, then it's very understandable that this might be putting you off of one or the other, of course. Now, I have gotten injured in a yoga class previously. Now, it did not put me off, but it made me question a lot of the things that we do in yoga, and maybe the kind of teachers that we seek out. So I think, again, the problem sometimes with yoga is that there's such a wide range and a big variety, um, that you can come across very, very different types of yoga classes. So I love the relaxation part of yoga. What I would say, where maybe Pilates has got a little bit of an edge over yoga, is, and this kind of contradicts, or it doesn't contradict, but maybe you feel like it could contradict what Colleen has said. I think the movements themselves in Pilates tend to be smaller, and therefore there's less room. Well, there's less room for getting injured. Now, this obviously has not been Colleen's experience, so there's all sorts of things obviously going on, and it might be, what exactly, how she made the movement. Maybe it was at the wrong time, but generally speaking, I think yoga has got bigger movements. There's a lot of kind of transitions from one to the next. So there's a little bit more room for mistakes, room for getting yourself hurt if you are kind of moving in a way that doesn't suit you so well. So relaxation, I think, is a point to yoga. Functional movements, I'm going to say there's a definite point for Pilates, because in yoga we make sometimes very, very strange movements, right, that you will not come across in day-to-day activities. There is also a little bit of this kind of glorification sometimes of flexibility. So in yoga, you tend to be praised, or you tend to be getting the feeling that you are better the more flexible you are. Now, I have found this with scoliosis to be a little bit of a contraindication. So if I know somebody is very flexible, I would probably send them to a Pilates class, right? And because there's such a connection between um, scoliosis and hypermobility, which means too much flexibility. Again, this would kind of speak for Pilates a little bit more, where we are focusing on strength and where we're focusing on strengthening and targeting specific um, muscle groups. Good. So Colleen is saying yes, and best a specialist group for us as with yours. I have more confidence and would try Pilates again. Good, Colleen. Excellent. Do you, yes, I am definitely. I'm planning to add some Pilates classes very, very soon in my Shine membership. Also kind of to get people maybe a little bit of a taste of, things that we do maybe differently. If so, there's a lot of things that I come across now, my Pilates training, where I'm like, I'm not going to do this with my people with scoliosis. So I think with both yoga and Pilates, there are things maybe that we would like to avoid. So, for example, there's a lot of rolling up and rolling down in Pilates, and there are also movements that include flexion and rotation, which, if you have seen any of my previous back chats, they can be a little bit tricky and they can be a little bit contraindicated for those with scoliosis. It doesn't mean you cannot do them. It just means that there is so much more that you need to be aware of. So there's definitely things in both yoga and Pilates where we want to say, maybe I don't do that, or maybe not as much, and I rather focus on other things. So again, in a way, this is why there is the Shine membership, which is my movement for scoliosis membership, originally mainly yoga, but also adding Pilates now to kind of focus on the things that are great for those with scoliosis. And of course, what is great is strengthening the core, strengthening the upper body. What is also great is working on the elongation of the spine, so lengthening. What is great is relaxation. Again, this is where the yoga part comes in, of course. So we kind of pick and choose and then take all the things that are great for anyone with a scoliotic spine, with spinal fusion, and we kind of leave the rest. Good. So I feel like I have kind of mentioned, obviously, another thing that I do enjoy about yoga. Maybe you feel like I've talked a lot about what is kind of what's problematic with yoga. But what I do enjoy about yoga is that there are these big body movements, and that some salutations, right, moving from one pose to the next. Maybe not for a beginner, but definitely for someone who is a little bit more advanced. You really get a different. I don't know if you agree with me, Colleen. I feel different at the end of a yoga class than I do at the end of a Pilates class. Big statement. I have a little bit more, I think with Pilates, I would have a little bit more of a sense of I've done some exercise, I've achieved something. Whereas at the end of a yoga class, I feel happy. I feel better in my body. And this, I feel, is due to yoga kind of acknowledging that we are so much more than our physical bodies. There's the energetic body, there's the mental side of it. There are the emotions that affect on how we are in our bodies. And I feel that kind of bringing all of this together, a little bit of that spiritual side, the relaxation part, the energetic side. We work a lot with different energies in yoga. There are poses that bring the energy down. There are poses that bring the energy up. We kind of play between those two always, and acknowledging that, I think, makes it an amazing practice, or can, with with the right teacher that you connect with, it can make this wonderful practice where you're just kind of feeling happy and content of the end of at the end of a yoga class. I don't know. That's what I experience. Um, Let me know what you think. Hi, Shalina. Shalina is saying, love being part of the Shine membership and really enjoy the long sessions. Yes, so we have we've got an hour sessions on Wednesdays. If you cannot be there live, then you can catch them up afterwards. You can practice them afterwards. And again, I'm looking to add some kind of shorter Pilates sessions as well once a week, because I think it's a great complement. So I think they work very, very well together. And at the moment, I'm kind of mixing them up a little bit in the yoga class, but I think it would be great as well for my Shine members to experience a proper, true, from beginning to end Pilates class, which is different, right? And it's not that one is better than the other, but they are just different. Okay, so Colleen is saying definitely feel taller after yoga, after Pilates, a little stretched. Yes, and it depends. So definitely, from what I've experienced in my Pilates practice, they tend to be smaller and very specific movements. They can be really, really challenging, right? I don't know if you agree, but to do them really well, that you have to kind of put a lot of effort and a lot of kind of focus. In a way, this is mindfulness as well. And to be honest, Pilates has probably saved my yoga practice, because I was kind of going um, in one direction too much, and kind of just there's a lot of repetitive movements in yoga, um, whereas Pilates kind of then brings in a little different dimension. So for me, for example, so just to be really kind of to give you a practical example, I found at some point I was getting a lot of pain or discomfort in my hamstring attachment. So just where the sitting bones are, basically. I was getting a lot of kind of niggling pain in that area, and I went to see a physio, and she was like, "Well, what are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm not what are you doing, but what do you do all day?" And I said, "Well, I'm a yoga teacher." And she said, "Ah, okay. So you probably do a lot of forward bends, and you probably sit in a cross-legged position a lot of times." And I said, "Yes, that's true." And she said, "Well, can you maybe do less of that?" And I said, "No, I can't." Because they are part of the practice. So, for example, in a downward dog, those hamstring attachments get challenged, right? In a forward bend, even if you do it with a beautifully long spine, they will be stretched and challenged. Sitting cross-legged, right? Even like in the beginning and the end, in our breathing practice, in our meditation, of course, I could change kind of the way that I sit, and maybe come into kneeling, or change up the way that my legs are. But still, I am sitting on these sitting bones and on these hamstring attachments. So my only option was, at the end of the day, to bolster that whole area up a little bit, and start to strengthen in this area with, guess what, some Pilates. Well, they were physio exercises, but they were really Pilates movements. And it's probably how I kind of then started thinking, maybe I need a little bit more. Maybe I need to change it up a little bit. Um, because I don't know if if you do something for long periods of time or a lot of years, um, you get into a habit, right? And you get into a pattern of always doing it the same thing. Now I try, and my Shine members know this, I try very, very hard to mix things up because I think variety is very, very important, and that we don't get into habits and we always keep it fresh. But nevertheless, there's definitely um, something that in my yoga practice that was repetitive and that was always coming up. Good. So Colleen is saying yoga is more psychological for me. So yeah, I mean maybe you want to say a little bit more about this, what that means to you. I definitely feel I'm gonna upset the Pilates community, aren't I? I don't think so because I've already said lots of great things about Pilates, but I definitely feel that yoga has got more layers to it. And I feel like, again, what I said a little bit earlier on, the energetic body, the mental, how are you feeling? How many thoughts are there right now? Um, all of that is kind of, we acknowledge this in our yoga practice. And I have found this to be, even though that's not the reason why I came to yoga in the first place, it was very much physical. It's probably been the most beneficial to acknowledge when my mind is busy. I know now what it's like to quieten my mind. I would have never experienced this if I hadn't kind of gone down the path of experiencing this through my yoga practice and acknowledging, now I am in my body and now I am not in my head and I'm not in my mind. Um, so I would, yes, if that's what you mean, Colleen, I would definitely agree with that, and that it's got a little bit, you can really kind of you can play with your emotions in a yoga practice, right? There's a way that certain yoga poses make you feel. And sometimes, so I have a very good friend who comes to my yoga classes, and she did say in one class, she said at the end of the class, she felt like crying, not because the class was so terrible and she got injured and she was in pain. No, but it did kind of, we did a lot of forward bends, and we worked on a lot of the shoulders and the neck, and she tends to hold a lot of tension there, and maybe some trauma and a lot of stress. So when we were working on this area, it came out, and it came out in the sense of, she felt the sadness and she felt like crying, but in a good way. It was like a release. She cried and then she felt better. So again, I don't think you would get this in a Pilates class. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. Um, there's definitely been a lot of, that's what I love about yoga. It connects you, mind, body, um, and spirit, right? In a very, very different and in a very unique way. Now, I do think that Pilates has got this kind of um, connection, or the mindfulness part is there, because we do very much focus on what we're doing. So I think that's great. And actually, when we're learning in the teacher training, again, interesting, this is a different approach, is to talk all the time. So to keep people on their toes. So to make sure um, they don't get into these periods of stillness where they just start thinking about their shopping, right? And I think for a beginner, this can definitely be very, very useful. So if you're someone who does um, get kind of distracted all the time, I would kind of say, Pilates is great because you're going to be busy all the time. You're going to be focusing on these movements. It's going to be hard, but you will not have time to think about your shopping list. Whereas in yoga, I feel there's obviously there will be periods of silence, hopefully, um, and this can be good, and this can be a little bit difficult for people. So it can be great to practice, well, what's actually happening if it's just you and there's nobody talking. But it can also be really, really challenging for people. So I have, had people who say they cannot stay in Shavasana. They're like, I can't do it. I can do 1 minute, but then I have to go, right? It's too difficult. Usually they say it's too boring for me. Now I would question this, right? Is it boring to be with yourself? Are you that boring? But I understand what they mean, right? I understand that it can be difficult not to do anything. Good. Let me know if you are just joining us. Let me know what's your experience. Do you prefer yoga? Do you prefer Pilates? Are you happy with doing a little bit of both of them? Um, or maybe also like, Colleen was saying she got injured in a Pilates class, or she got hurt, which put her off. So maybe you've got a similar experience with either yoga or Pilates. Um, I also think with yoga, you understand each part of your body better and how they are connected. Yes, I agree. So, and I think this kind of brings me back to the whole body kind of uh, experiences and movements. I feel like you can experience them better in, the lovely standing poses, the warriors, warrior 1, 2, and 3, where you use the whole body, right? It's not just one part or one muscle group, it's the whole body that is involved. And yes, you can feel how everything is connected. So I sometimes say, can you feel how your left toe is connected uh, to your right little finger, for example, because we experience these kind of big connections, whereas in Pilates, it tends to be those smaller, more specific movements that are targeting specific muscle groups. Having said this, if you have an injury, if you are working through something, I would probably say go to a Pilates class. If you've got something acute going on, go to a good Pilates class. So the one where I'm training at the moment, it's the APPI, which is the Australian Physiotherapy and Pilates Institute. So they are all physios that train us, and they understand rehab, right? They understand what you have to do when you've gone through an injury, and how you kind of get out of it, and how you slowly build up certain muscle groups. You will probably not find this in yoga, even though there is yoga therapy. There's something called yoga therapy. Again, it's a little bit different from Pilates, or the therapeutic way that Pilates works. So maybe we could even say that Pilates is a little bit closer to physiotherapy, maybe than, well, certainly closer than yoga. Good. I think I have kind of I've gone through my list. So there are definitely pros and cons of both of them. And I think with scoliosis especially, you do want to it's more about the teacher, and it's more about finding someone who knows about scoliosis. And there's some great people that are Pilates teachers that know how to work with scoliosis, and there's some great yoga teachers as well. So seeking those out, especially if you are new to any of them, is a good idea. And then again, you kind of want to make sure you find the thing that you actually enjoy doing. So let me know what you think about this last little thought. I'm going to put this out there. I feel it's easier to practice yoga on my own than it is to practice Pilates. I'm going to let you marinate on this. Um, Now, this might just be my personal experience, and maybe that's just because I've been practicing more yoga than Pilates. But I find it harder um, well, not just to motivate myself, but these movements, small movements in Pilates, even though they are so good and so beneficial, they are also so specific, and there's so many things you have to kind of go through and make sure that you're doing them properly all the time, that it kind of um, I find it more difficult. I find it much easier when there's somebody there who will then either look at you or who you can follow. But this might just be my perception, because I've been just practicing more yoga. But I think yoga is a little bit more forgiving. If you do not do something 100%, you're still doing it, right? Whereas in Pilates, this is a little bit different. Good. So thank you so much for everyone who was here in the chat. And maybe if you are watching this on the replay, make sure you do let me know, even though I'm not there live. I would love to hear your comments about what do you prefer about one, what do you prefer about the other, how do you think it's different, and what do you specifically enjoy about them as well. And then maybe also what do you find that is kind of difficult. Right. Thank you so much, everyone. I've gone over my half an hour. Terrible. But I'm having so much fun. So apologies for that. I'm going to try to keep it shorter again next time. Let me know if there's any specific topics you want me to cover. And I'm going to say thank you so much for joining me. And I'm going to see you next week. Bye, everyone.